think we are ready. Thank you again. I'd like to call to order the Fairfield Board of Education regular meeting for September 6th, 2016. Present is Mrs. Eileen Lou McCormick, Mr. Mark Patton, Ms. Donna Carnell, Mrs. Jessica Gerber, myself, Philip Dwyer, Mr. Anthony Calabrese, Ms. Tricia Pisco, Mrs. Jennifer Maxon Kennelly, and Mr. John Llewellyn. If I could ask you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. First item on our agenda is public comment. Is there any member of the public that wish to come forward and address the board at this time? Seeing nobody walking forward, on to new business. Item 4A, approval of election of superintendent of schools for Fairfield Public Schools. I'll make a couple of comments and then we'll introduce the motion. First, I want to thank the Board of Education. They sign up when they run for a number of meetings and reading a lot of documents. They generally don't sign up to do that in the process of searching for a superintendent, which adds a lot of meetings, a lot of documents to read through, a lot of interviews to conduct. So I thank the Board of Education for that commitment to this school district. We hired Hazard Young Atiyah, HYA they go by, to guide us in this search process. They provided very good professional services to us and were helpful in researching the candidates and their resumes, and more importantly, creating the profile for who we wanted to hire as a board so that they could use the profile as a measure as to which candidates they thought matched the profile the best. We did end up with 27 candidates from about a dozen states. We chose 6 to interview, and we chose 4 to bring back for an interview, and then we conducted a final telephone interview of the finalist. So it was a thorough process, including, of course, checking references and background checks and all that. We had an excellent field, and so I think the board is pleased ultimately with their final selection. And so I'd like to announce that Dr. Tony R. Jones, who is the current superintendent at the Falls Church, Virginia School, her name will be put forward for election as our next superintendent. Please take note that I said her name. Tony is spelled with an I, so that there's no confusion. So, having said that, let me read the recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the election of Tony R. Jones as superintendent of the Fairfield Public Schools effective December 5th, 2016, and that it further approve a contract commencing December 5th, 2016 through June 30th, 2019 in the form and in accordance with the terms previously distributed to the members of the Fairfield Board of Education. Do I have a motion? Mr. Patton, do I have a second? Mr. Calabrese? Mr. Patton, do you want to make some comments?
Sure. It's my pleasure and my honor to make the motion that the Fairfield Board of Education approve the election of Dr. Tony Jones as its next superintendent. Dr. Jones brings a positive attitude to everything she's done in her career. She listens before she acts. She listens to her staff, to the parents, and to the students to whom she advocates for, and to her community. She's no stranger to the prioritizing of the needs of her district and has vast experience making the hard decisions when developing her annual budget. At her last position as superintendent in Falls Church, Virginia, a high-performing district very similar in demographics to Fairfield, Dr. Jones has demonstrated excellent growth in moving the needle forward for her students. She is a person of great character who believes in accountability and communication between all stakeholders and staff. She has proven herself an exemplary leader, improving each district that she has led both in efficiency and in student achievement. Once again, I'm excited to recommend that the board approve the election of Dr. Tony Jones as superintendent of the Fairfield Public School System.
Mr. Mr. Calabrese, do you wish to make comments?
I do. Thank you. It's with excitement that I second the recommendation of Dr. Tony Jones as the superintendent of the Fairfield Public Schools. The Board of Education has conducted an extensive search with the help of the consulting firm Hazard Young, Attia and Associates. This nationwide search has been thorough and comprehensive. We interviewed 6 highly qualified candidates and narrowed it down to our highly qualified recommendation of Dr. Jones. Dr. Jones has a vast experience in the education field during her career. Her passion for education has taken her all over the world, literally. She's originally from Oklahoma. She went on to begin her teaching career in the classrooms of Reno, Nevada, where she taught for 2 years before moving overseas to Australia, where she continued to work in the classroom for the next 5 years. She returned to her home state of Oklahoma, where she again worked back in the classroom, but then moved on to the administrative side of things. She was hired as an elementary school principal, then a middle school principal, then as Director of Secondary Education and Technology, and then finally as Chief Academic Officer. It was in 2011 that she was eventually lured away from her home state with a superintendent offer in Falls Church City in Virginia. Wherever Dr. Jones has gone, you will see a track record of excellence and commitment to improving public education. Dr. Jones has been the head of one of the highest performing districts in the state of Virginia and even had schools nationally ranked. It is my honor and privilege to second the recommendation of Dr. Jones as the next superintendent of the Fairfield Public Schools.
Thank you. Other board members wish to make any comments? Okay. Under some circumstances, the superintendent might attend this meeting so that you could kind of put a name and a face together. She is actually at her own board meeting tonight. And it's her intent that once she hears of our action, she will then notify her board. As you know, superintendents are very sensitive about communities not hearing through the grapevine. And so this actually works out well for both her current board and our board and our community. Her leadership is aware of it, but the full community will be hearing it down in Falls Church about the same time that you do. If there are no other comments from the board members, the motion in front of us is that the Board of Education approve the election of Tony R. Jones as Superintendent of the Fairfield Public Schools effective December 5th, 2016, and that it further approve a contract commencing December 5th, 2016 through June 30th, 2019 in the form and in accordance with the terms previously distributed to the members of the Fairfield Board of Education. All in favor, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. So you can start sending it out to wherever you wish to send it as the audience. Thank you. On to item 4B, which is approval of the CSDE authorized signatures. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the signature change form for the Bureau of Health, Nutrition, Family Services, and Adult Education per enclosure number 1. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Maxon Kennelly. Do I have a second? Ms. Pitko. Do you wish to describe what this is, or somebody from the staff?
Fairly straightforward. Doreen, do you wish to comment on this? It's just making sure we can sign up for the free reduced meal grants in compliance with the federal regulations.
Any questions from the board members concerning the signature form? Any questions from board members concerning this business item? Having none, we are, as you might note, we are down to 8 board members. 7. 8 permanently, 7, I guess, temporarily. Any questions from the public who wish to comment on this business item? It is a voting item. Seeing nobody come forward, the recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the signature change form for the Bureau of Health, Nutrition, Family Services, and Adult Education per enclosure number 1. All in favor, please raise your hand. Mr. Patton, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Calabrese, Ms. Pitko, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, and Mr. Llewellyn. It passes 7-0. Thank you very much. First reading of policies for approval, item 4C. I believe the chair of the policy committee wants to make comments, I presume.
No, once again, no language, just as a reminder, we're still working our way through the CABE audit, and none of these involve language changes determined by the policy committee. They've, whether they're for deletion, whether it's for legal reference correction or additional language, it has gone through the staff here and double-checked by CABE. And as always, I would ask if any board members have questions. Obviously, feel free to ask now, but otherwise, if they could get them to me in advance of the next meeting, I would appreciate it.
Any questions from board meeting members on the policies that will be added and the policies that will be deleted? Mrs. Gerber.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions about the 3516, but if you'd prefer, I can send them to you in writing, if you think that would be easier. I don't want to bog things up. I just had a few technical questions just about who's writing certain things and what the committee is and that type of thing.
If you could send those to me,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
Will
Thank
do.
you.
Okay.
Any other questions from board members on the addition of these policies or the deletion of these policies? Hearing none, this will be on the agenda as an action item at our next regular meeting. And that takes care of items C, and I presume, and Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, you were talking about both C and D at that time, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And no board members had questions about D in case they were thinking we were only talking about C. Thank you very much. On to item 5, approval of the minutes. The recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular meeting of August 23rd, 2016. Mrs. Gerber moves. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly seconds. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all in favor that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular meeting of August 23rd, 2016, please raise your hand. Mr. Patton, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Calabrese, Ms. Pitko, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, opposed. Mr. Llewellyn. Motion passes 6-1. On to the superintendent's report, so the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, congratulations to the board on the successful conclusion of your superintendent search. There are few decisions, if any, that are more important that you will be making over your years on the board, and I look forward to welcoming Dr. Jones the next time she's in town, and certainly do everything that I can over the next few weeks and months to help her get off to a great start. So, congratulations. I can report that the Fairfield Public Schools opened last Thursday with an enrollment just over 10,000 students, about 4,590 at the elementary level, 2,360 some at the middle school level, and about 3,050 high school students. This is a preliminary count. As you well know, the official count is October 1st, but that's where we are as of opening day. I had a chance to visit several of the schools Thursday and Friday, and everybody seemed happy to be back, lots of energy and enthusiasm. I particularly enjoyed watching this faculty at Fairfield Ward High School welcome the new freshmen with a standing ovation as they walked down the hallway from their auditorium meeting onto their first classes. That was a very inspiring way for them to start out. I can also tell you that all of the transportation and school operations appeared to have gone smoothly. I had the privilege of riding along on a school bus with driver Sandy Richards on the first day, and as you might expect, the high school students were very laid back, very asleep, not too happy to be up at 6:45. Sixth graders were intently focused on the window and didn't have too much to say. Seventh and eighth graders, all abuzz, excited to be back. And of course, at the elementary level, the stops were prolonged by parents and grandparents who had to take pictures and videos and all kinds of commemorations of first day of school. But it was a very nice way to see the town from the windshield of the bus and see some of the kids come back for the new year. Mr. Dwyer and Mr. Tetro and I had the privilege of welcoming the faculty back a week ago Monday at a convocation program also at Fairfield Ward High School. And we were joined by the Fairfield Ludlow Choir under the direction of Mr. Kevin Codalis, and they did a fantastic job. I know, Anthony, you were there, and if anybody else was in the crowd. Very impressed with the fine tuning of all those voices and the nice spirit that they brought to the occasion. Also had an opportunity to meet with our new teachers here in this room, and also Bob Smoller was kind enough to include me in their new teacher luncheon down at the beach. And you've got a lot of folks, and Ann will report in just a few minutes on how many new folks, but quite a crowd of new people happy to be working for the school system. And this might be a good time, if Ann Leffert, if you could come forward and give the board a little rundown on the work that's been done to staff the schools and where we stand at this point.
So, Ann Leffert, Director of Human Resources. So we're in pretty good shape at the moment. A few vacancies that I'll tell you about in just a few minutes. We had some staffing changes that began in the spring when we looked at the course selection at both high schools. And due to those selections, we needed to add 1.3 FTE to cover those. We also were seeing more students coming into ECC and coming in the fall, so we added another special education teacher at ECC for another 1.0. We saw 9 elementary sections increase. We saw 3 go down, so for a net increase of 6 elementary sections. Overall, we had an 8.7 FTE adjustment based on enrollment that we needed to account for. I will say, of the 8 sections that we thought we were going to see increase in the budget that then got reduced out of the budget, 5 of those did actually increase and accounted for 5 of those increases. We remained at 28 retirees. We had budgeted for 18. So that's where we stand there. Currently, we have 4 vacancies that are all a result of some very recent resignations. 3 high school special education positions, a high school counselor, and an elementary school psychologist. So we're actively engaged in the searches for those folks. It was very active across the state, I guess I would have to say, in terms of hiring later in the season, more than I've seen in the past 4 years that I've been in this position. We have 5 new staff members that are being held by their districts and are starting at various stages in the next couple of weeks. And we're holding 4 staff members who are moving to other districts and found out very late that they'd be doing that. So that's a juggling match. We always expect some of that at the beginning of the year, but it seems a little higher this year. And I do know that many districts are struggling with finding some folks. We had a number of positions that were shortage area positions to fill this year, and I have to say our administrative team and the staff that they chose to be on their selection teams did a fabulous job. I'm so impressed with who they hired. So to date we have 73 new hires, and we have a few more to fill, as I said, and so we're actively working on that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leffert.
Before you leave, you might have other things to say, but the board members might have some questions that Mrs. Leffert could answer. So any questions for Mrs. Leffert before she rejoins the ranks? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Thanks. That's it for me, Mr. Chairman. That's the superintendent's report.
Okay. Any questions for the superintendent's report that you wish to raise from the board? Seeing none, thank you. Committee and liaison reports. Anybody have things that they want to say from any committee or liaison assignment they have? Mrs. Maxon Kennelly.
Just one word regarding policy, that the recodifying of the entire policy manual should be done by the end of September. No promise of a definitive date, but by the end of the month that should be done. And we're actually hoping that everyone can bring their policy manuals back, primarily because they immediately become a very inaccurate source of information. There will be no more updates ever made via paper, so if you ever were to reference those, it's entirely possible that you would be referencing inaccurate information and the numbers will be different. So if board members
would be so kind as to bring their policy manuals back. Again, it will be online. All updates will be done online, and by the end of September, it will be a very new system in that regard. So that was it from policy.
Any questions for the Policy Committee as a committee report? Mr. Patton?
So if a board member wanted a hard copy of the revised edition when everything was finally settled, would that be possible?
You could go at home. You could pull up each policy. You may press print. And you'll get, that had been an initial conversation that maybe, but it was just fine. There would be no updates done by paper. So even if there were to be a new one created, once again, the moment the work continues, it would be out of date. And it just was really an inefficient, and I'm one who loves paper copies, but that'll be on you, Mr. Patton, if you wish that copy.
Fair enough.
You save a tree.
Because I have been hopelessly behind in pulling out one piece of paper and putting in the other piece of paper, I virtually have always gone to the website and printed it out whenever somebody asks me a question. Any other committee or liaison reports? The Holland Hill Building Committee will be meeting this Thursday. They continue to move forward on that. My guess is mid-November they'll have their next stage of pricing out the proposal for their full renovation of that building to meet the education specs. At the moment, there are no changes in the ed specs that they contemplate requiring based on their initial research. Okay, open board comment. Any members of the board wish to make a comment? If not, you'll see that one item is on the agenda, and that is the town hall meeting schedule. I put down every date from September 17th till October 29th, not counting Friday nights or Sundays. And lo and behold, between school conflicts, individual board conflicts, religious conflicts, community conflicts, there is not a single date that does not conflict with something that is important for the school, or that we would not have full attendance at the town hall meeting. And so we have a choice of picking a date that has the most people there, or we look to, I'm going to say, mid-November to mid-December. My own personal purposes, it won't be November 8th. But nonetheless, does the board have any comment that they wish to make in terms of, we do want to keep this process going, but it's difficult in the beginning of a school year to find a date that works. Any advice or comments that board members wish to make? Mrs. Maxon Connelly.
Just my personal view, of course, I think it's best and most ideal if everyone can be there, but what's most important to me is making sure that it's the best date for the community. And so in striking out school open houses and striking out religious holidays and striking out school concerts, which clearly would take parents out of the picture, I personally would go for the date in probably at this point October or late September, where the most board members could go. I just think November and December, family-wise, gets a lot tougher. So that my personal opinion would be to try to go for the date where the most can make it, and hopefully other things can be shuffled from that initial attempt at seeing available dates, but that's my personal preference.
Okay. Any other comments board members wish to make? Mr. Llewellyn.
We could set aside time at the beginning of each meeting, almost like returning public comment, and make it more open, and set aside, say, half an hour at the beginning of several meetings to get people's feedback, because this is a date that's already on a lot of people's calendar, especially, the 9 or 10 of us sitting around the table, as well as many members of the public.
The City of Bridgeport they have their official time, using our time, 7:30 to start, and then they announce that board members public can come, I think, 45 minutes before this official start time to do essentially what you're saying. I've gone to a few of those in my role with the YMCA, and what happens is that council members, in this case board members perhaps, say, well, the meeting starts at 7:30, so I won't get there till 7:30, and the public is speaking to half a board, which doesn't, what's the phrase that people use today? The optics of that don't look too good either. But it is a method that boards have used to try and accomplish what we've been trying to accomplish. Any other comments from board members? I do have to hear from 2 or 3 board members that did not respond, and so picking a date that the most number of board members can attend, it'll be difficult for me to do that until I hear from 2 or 3 more board members. So I will send out another email, and hopefully I can arrive at a date that is the majority of the board can attend. Okay. Second comment I would make under open board comment, for those of you who are saying, okay, you voted a contract, where is the contract? It's not a public document until I actually sign it. The board members probably will get it in the next day or 2, and the public, if you call up the central office, you'll be able to get a copy of the contract should you have an interest in seeing it. It followed in form and substance the contract that we had annually voted for Dr. Title, because the benefits have not really changed, and that's what forms most of the contract language. With no other open board comment, we'll move to adjournment. That this regular meeting of the Board of Education adjourn. All in favor? That's one. Okay, first. Moved. Seconded, Mr. Calabrese. Mr. Patton.